Okay, yeah. So the session is recording now. So let's go on to the next slide. So why was there a need of creating this PCF control? Right, we already had web resources where we could write HTML, or we could use Angular JS or Vue.js or React or whatever web development tools we have, right? The need for creating PCF control was when web resources render, you don't actually get the context of for the app, right? So if you're working with a model-driven app's context is not available in web resources. You had to use hacky solutions to use the context, right? So so PCF enables you to get the context directly. So you get the access to the to the context in the PCF controls. Then when the web resources loads, you might have seen this, and most of even my clients always complain when they're using web resources. Web resources are the last one to load on the form, and that gives a very, like, it's very performance heavy. So it doesn't look good. Everything else loads and then the web resource is loading, so you're still, the page load is still going on, and it's not a good experience for the users. But with this code components loads along with the form itself. So it increases, it decreases the load time and increases the performance of the overall form, right? So that's a good experience for the users. And well, the cherry on the topping is that it also gives you the nice UX experience, because when you build PCF uh, components, the what the unique ability of those controls is that it gets the theme of the parent. So it inherits the parent's CSS when the control loads. There might be some CSS that you might have to add on top of those, but most of the time, if you're building something very um, out of the box, not very complex, you might not even have to apply any custom CSS, and you just build the control and then load it. It would look exactly like CRM. So you don't have to worry about this creating crazy CSS that you used to do when you were working with HTML web resources. So that helps us a lot when we are creating controls. Then the second thing is number of files that are generated. So if you're working with HTML, you would have HTML file, then you'll have your CSS file, and then you'll have either your JavaScript if you're working with JavaScript, or if you're working with TypeScript, then you'll have TypeScript files, right? So there would be like 3-4 files at least that you would be working when you're creating HTML web resources. And then now when you want to deploy, you have to make sure that you're deploying the correct files in the correct environment, you're packaging it correctly, all these kind of things, right? But with code components, you don't have to do that anymore, because there's only one file created all the time. It's called custom control file, and it's a type in the solution. So it's called custom controls, right? So you just, whenever you build your custom component, so custom component can have multiple files. You can have TypeScript, you can have CSS, you can have resource files, you can have HTML files, you can have tons of files. Once you build it, the output of the build is always one single uh, control. So that control is what you want to deploy from one solution, one instance to other instances. So that makes your life easier when you want to move files across environments, right? Then there's reusability. So with HTML web resources, if you build it, now if you want to use it on some other client, you have to do some code changes. It might not be um, configurable. Like say if I created a text analytical control where it provided a text analytics for what the sentiment is, what are the key phrases, all those kind of stuff. Now, text analytics works with key, and key is unique to a client. And also it also works with the endpoint, and endpoint could be different. If you're working in US, it could be East US. If you're working in Europe, it could be Europe 1, Europe 2, it could be Australia, it could be anything. The endpoint could be anything, right? So your endpoint is going to change, the key is going to change for the client. So now if you have a HTML web resource and you're moving it to another client, you would want to go in and change the code again. But with custom control, now you have a configuration ability. So in the form editor itself, you can configure the control to select what your key would be, what your endpoints would be, or do other kind of configuration as well. So it makes your life easier in terms of reusability. So that's why we ended up having PCF controls, which is really great to work with when we are developing controls for CRM or CDS. But how do you get started? What are the prerequisites? So first thing that you want to have is you want to install npm or Node.js. So to install that, you can go to node.js.org, and then first you can install either the LTS version or any other version as well. You can install the full Node.js version, or you can install the LTS version. Doesn't matter. We just want Node.js to be installed. Okay, so the website is nodejs.org. Okay, you can search for that. Then you need .NET Framework 4.6.2. If you have already been working with CRM, you should already have that installed on your machine. Then the third is you would need either Visual Studio 2017 or 2019, or you can even use Visual Studio Code. So if you don't have a license for Visual Studio 2017 or 2019 on your machine, don't worry. Install Visual Studio Code and you should be fine. Yeah, I use Visual Studio Code all the time and I love it. And especially for development of PCF controls. I love developing PCF control using Visual Studio Code. And then last and the most important piece is the PowerUp CLI. So this is a command line interface that helps us to create the code component. So it's very necessary and very important while developing PCFs. Everything works based on this PowerUp CLI. To download PowerUp CLI, I'm going to show you in today's session how to get PowerUp CLI. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, so let's see some examples, right? So we have been talking about PCF, but what exactly is PCF? Yeah, so this is my my model-driven app I've created, and what I've done here is I've created a regular form, and on that form I've added two types of components. Yeah, so this is my first component. Now, as you can see, this is the regular field. This is nothing to do with the custom control. These are regular options, right? And this is what my control look. This is what CRM looks like. But what I've done here below is I've added a custom control, and what this custom control does is it reads the text from this field and then shows me the sentiment. If the sentiment is 50, 100, what the sentiment is. If it is above 80, it's considered as positive sentiment. If it is below 20, 25, it's considered as negative sentiment, and everything else in between is neutral. So you can put your rules in place for this. And then you can have detect language, key phrases, and entities. So in this control, what it checks is if my detect language is checked as yes, then it will show the language. If the key phrase is checked to yes, then it will show the key phrase, and so on and so forth. So if I switch it off, I want to save this. I don't think so it works. Yeah, so once I save it, then see the language is not shown anymore. If I switch it to yes, then the language shows up again. So this is the kind of configuration that I was talking about earlier. So the configuration does not even have to be static. It can also depend on certain fields. So if the field value changes, then the configuration changes and the control can change accordingly. So that's the beauty of using PCF control. Yeah. And the other, so this is based on the field. So we are working only on the field. So this is the field value and this is how the entire control is working on. But we can also add controls on the grid itself. So I have this grid. This is the CRM grid or the CDS grid, right? Where we have the full name, email, and then we have this pagination. Now it only shows top 4 records. Then I have to paginate and then go through this loading thing, which slows down a bit, right? But you can have a nice grid where you can improve the performance or improve the display, right? So in this case, what I've done is I've created this and yeah. And so what this grid does is this has a description field over here, but see how what it does is if you look at the tooltip, it cuts off at in friendship and then it has the 3 dots, right? But user wanted to see more of what the description is, which they are not able to see in this case. So what I did is I created a nice custom control where it actually shows you the entire description, so you don't have to worry about whether the description is going to cut off or not. So in this case, it has like 500 characters and it shows all 500 characters in this control. So that's a nice way, right? And also it has this nice quick way of loading all the records. So you don't have to paginate with your multiple records, right? So, and it has all the functionality. You can have sort, you can have selections, multiple selections, and then this particular ribbon on top changes accordingly. So if I don't select anything, I get the new contact creation over here, and it works exactly how the out of the box works. If I select any of the contact and if I say edit, it will open up the edit screen exactly how the out of the box works. So it works similar to what out of the box works, but it's a custom control. So that's what is the strength of using custom controls. Okay. Any questions so far? I'll take the silence as no.
Danish, I do have a couple of questions. I'm not
Yep.
too sure if they are kind of like in a fit into the context right now, but I'll just ask, like, if you think it's something that you can, address it in the later session, like, or maybe later during the session or after, that's fine. So shall I go?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned about the context and the web resources, right? And at the moment, I guess there is no such way into the web resources you can use form context, right? And that's the form context you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay. And does it mean that the web resource is going to go away in future? Is there any prediction like that, or PCF going to roll over that? Anything like that?
No, web resources are there to stay
Okay.
because we need JavaScripts, right? So JavaScript is also one type of web resources. HTML is
Yes.
again one type of web resources, right? So
Yes.
it's web resources are there to stay. HTML is also going to stay as well. It's
Okay.
just that sometimes you need more to do to your controls, right? Than using a
Okay.
regular HTML. HTML is just to probably show something or
Exactly.
to do something simple.
Mhm.
Then you might use HTML. But if you want to do
Yes.
something complex and something reusable, then you might want to go with PCF control. So that's always going to be
Okay.
a decision whether you want to
Mhm.
go with HTML web resources or whether you want to
Mhm.
go with PCF controls. So it's up to you what you feel comfortable with. And if it is something to do with configuration, if you're going to build something reusable components, then I would
Mhm.
always prefer doing PCF controls over HTML
Okay.
web resources.
I do understand the rendering is obviously like the PCF. It's way more better because it looks like a part of the form. It
Yeah.
doesn't load like iframe, right? Whereas the web resources does load as iframe. But yeah, so I do work with a lot of React, right? And I always get a problem because the xrm.page is about to deprecate, right? And it's already been deprecated for some time, right? But in the web
Yes.
resources, you can't get the form contacts.
Right, you
So
cannot.
yeah, so there is any way you think of like, where we can use it, or that's the only way we can like, exam.page is the only way to use the form context in the web resources?
Well, there are some hacky ways that we we have done in the past, but I wouldn't
Mm-hmm,
recommend doing that because that's not supported by Microsoft. So
mm-hmm.
anything that is unsupported is literally that's a hacky solution. But yeah,
Okay.
if again, I mean, if you are building something that is not going to require form context, then you can build it with HTML web resources. That would be my answer.
Okay, all right. The second thing is, second question is PCF binds like, to a field, right? So I know recently like Microsoft opened up the, PCF to the generalized component. You can build it for the Canvas apps, right? I didn't work
Mhm.
on that part, but does that also require like, the binding of the field or data set, or is it be generalized one completely?
Uh, so you can bind it to a field. It has to be binded to a field. So if it is a required field, uh, so you have to bind. When you say bind, what do you
Mm,
mean by bind
Okay,
exactly?
so
Because
in the
bind
in the
means.
okay, in the
Mhm,
manifest file, you have to mention like, either it's a data set type or it's a field type, right?
mhm,
And if it's a field type, you have to create a field where you're actually going to deploy that PCF so that it actually overrides the behavior of that field, right?
mhm.
Right. But is there any way, because I've seen like, people would like to do more than just the changing the behavior of the field. They actually would like to create a whole, like, let's suppose a small form, which kind of like, go and talk to Azure Functions or something else. And they would like to render that complete PCF as like, they just create the dummy field and then they deploy that PCF completely. So that field is pretty much not used, but they would like to use the PCF rendering engine more for the power, if that makes
Yeah.
sense what
So
I'm trying to say.
that's yeah. So that's again goes back to the using the hacky solution again. Uh, the basic fundamental behind PCF control is to render your attributes or your fields differently, right? So,
Exactly.
for
Okay.
example, like if it's a Boolean field, then you don't want to show Boolean, you want to show a thumbs up and a thumbs down. So things like that. So you're rendering those controls. So everything in model driven apps is control. So your text boxes, your drop
Mhm.
downs, your flip switches, your subgrids, everything is a control. So you're just rendering the controls differently. That's what the idea behind PCF is. Now, if you want to use it by creating a dummy field and then replacing the dummy field with a control that would do something different, that's up to you.
Okay. All right. So, okay, with the Canvas apps, obviously, like, are we going to touch Canvas apps PCF as well, or are we just going to touch the model
Yes,
driven one? We are going to. Okay.
both
So, because,
canvas. Yeah, yeah. We are
okay.
gonna
Cool.
do so the way we are gonna create the controls, uh, and I'll also guide you through the pitfalls of what not to do so that it would work on Canvas app as well. So we are gonna touch those in the coming
Okay.
sessions.
Perfect. Thanks, Danish. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so let's move on. So the next thing that we are going to look at. So we looked at the controls, but I'm gonna before we actually dive into developing these controls, I want to show you the configuration as well, right? So how do you configure these controls? Now, to configure, as many of you know, that Microsoft released a new UI to do the configuration. Uh, but right now, to do the configuration, you still have to go to the classic form. So you can go either from here or from the settings, the old way of doing your customization. But I like to go through the new way of doing it just so that I get used to the new interface. That's why I try to make sure that I'm going to the new interface first. But to add custom controls, you cannot use the new interface. So you have to go to the classic one. So in the classic one, what you do is let's look at the field control first, right? So what I've done here is I have this text analytics field over here. And what I did is I added the field twice. The reason why I added the field twice is because I wanted to even have the edit ability, but then I also wanted to change the display into something else. So that's why I did this field twice. So here is the edit out of the box field, and then here is again the same field, but I just made it look different using the PCF control. So here is my control called text analytics. And then this is the configuration area that I was talking about. So you can add a new different subscription key. You can add a different endpoint. You can bind several other properties. In this case, I binded it to this flip switches. So this flip switches has been binded over here. And that's why I'm able to control what gets displayed on my control by just changing this flip switches. So from yes to no and then no to yes, it should show the data. For some reason, it doesn't work sometimes. There you go. Okay, so that's how you can have configuration abilities. And good thing, if you might have noticed, is when you add a control, you select any of the control. So let's select text analytics again. You can see that it tells you what are the types this control is available. So this control is available on text area, and on multiple. It also provides you the description, and it also gives you an image that you can upload over here. I haven't done that, but I'll show you how to do that as well. So like if I go to say autocomplete, so you can see how it shows you the image over here. So this is the image that you can even add to your controls. Yeah. And when you go to the properties, you can see the property descriptions over here, and also the compatible types that it asks for. So these are all the things that keeps on changing. So this is a name, this is the compatible types, and this is the description over here. Okay, so that's how we configure the field type control. Now, if you want to configure a subgrid, or if you want to change the subgrid, then you have to add the subgrid first. Once you add the subgrid, then you can go to change properties of that subgrid, and then go to controls, and then you can add the controls. Now, whenever you add the controls, you can only see the controls that are eligible for that particular type. So in this case, if it is a subgrid, that means it is a data set. So you would only see the controls that are eligible for data set. You won't see every control that is available in the system. Similarly, if you have created a control.
Sorry, Dinesh. We are getting some kind of a disturbance. Is it only me or anybody else is getting it too?
Anyone else is getting?
Yeah, the sound is cracking a little bit.
Okay, let me, so hold on, let me change my headphones, because these are new headphones that I got. I don't know if this is the issue. So let me just change my headphones quick.
Thanks, Dinesh.
All right, how about now? Are you guys
better? A lot better.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, maybe the headphones are not good. I'll return them. Okay, so so here is so what I was saying is the controls are based on the type. So if you, for example, let's say you have a field of type two options, right? So you created a two option field, but your control that you created was for single line text. So when you go to the two option properties and look for the controls, you won't be able to see your control because your control was only supposed to work with single line text. So those are the things that you should always keep in mind. Okay. And again, in this also you can have multiple properties, and then you can get the property values when you're working with the controls. We'll look into that. But things to keep in mind is always remember when you add a control to make sure that you select this box, because what happens is, I'll show you what happens. So I'll remove this and I'll go and add this. And I've done this multiple times. So when you're adding a hovering list, I go and configure my control and I select OK. But the mistake that I did here is I should go and make sure that I'm enabling this radio buttons. OK, I've done this 100 times. I go here, configure the control, add it, and then go and refresh the form and then see why is my control not working. So anytime you add a control, make sure that you first thing you do is you go and check this off. OK, if you don't want it on phone, then make sure that you're checking the phone and read only, and making sure you are configuring this correctly. OK, so and then every time you do any changes on the form, obviously you have to save and publish. So that's like a default thing. Any questions about configurations or anything before we move on?
Oh, hey Danish, I have one quick question.
Yeah.
You were showing us the configuration over there where we push the endpoints and subscription key and everything. So if we are moving the solution, say from dev to another environment, do we have then go over there and change over there if we have different environments? Like for,
Yes.
okay, so that is kind of a manual effort whenever we move the solution.
Well, you could. So what you could do is, in that case, you can either use environment variables to get your values. So and then so instead of asking the users to configure this on the form, you can configure it through environment variables. So in the control itself, you pull environment variables and then get the values from it and then use it in your code, right? So then environment variables can be moved from one instance to another instances. And then you have the ability to either override them or not to override them. Some could be global, some could be local, things like that on the environment variables.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, but this is mostly where you're creating a control for the community, or you're creating a control as an ISV, right? So you want to have that ability to have configuration done on the UI. Sometimes you might also, as I said, like you can actually bind it to a control on a form, and then that control is what is driving the visibility, or say how your control is going to render on the form. For example, like this one, right? So I configured it in such a way it was not subscription key, or let's say I hard coded my subscription key and hard coded my endpoint, but I wanted this to drive based on how and what the user select on the UI. So if user deselects detect language, then I want the language to be hidden on the control. So things like that are also configurable, right? So that's what is driving the how your control is loading.
Okay, thanks.
Dinesh, sorry, quick question about the environment variables. I think they're still in preview, right?
Environment variables, I think, and I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that, but I think so they're out of preview now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
because I think so we started using them in some of the projects that we are building.
Okay, so it's pretty much like, it's more like instead, we used to have settings entity where we keep all the fields and every single thing that pretty much like, can be replaced by environment variables now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, but it's more than that. It's like it has two entities. If you have not worked with environment variables, it has environment variable definition and then environment variable values kind of stuff. So it has two entities. So you can have once you work with environment variables, you'll know. But it's enhanced version of what settings used to do before.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so let's see. We have in store next. So we have community tools created. So if you're building any component and if you want to share it with the community, and you want to boast yourself, so then head over to pcf.gallery, and you can send a request to Guido through Twitter. So he has a Twitter handle called PCF Gallery, so you can message him on PCF Gallery and then share your control that you have created. I believe it has to be open source, so you have to give your control name, title, some video or images, and the path to your GitHub repo where your control is, things like that, and then he'll publish it to PCF Gallery. If not, it's still a nice place to go and check out other controls that people have created, amazing controls that other users have created. So head over to PCF Gallery and then check it out. Also, you can share your ideas. So if you have idea and if you say that, oh, it's super complicated, I might not be able to do it, then you can also share your ideas over there. Then I've created a PCF builder. So it's an XRM toolbox tool, and it just makes things easier when you're developing your PCF control, because the idea behind that was you don't want to spend time writing CLI commands, and you don't have to worry about CLI commands. You just have to focus on writing the code and then getting it built and deployed to the CDS environments, and not worry about anything else. So all the version incrementation, or running multiple commands, like if you're um, initiating your PCF project, then you need to run npm build. You don't have to worry about that because that's all taken care in the tool itself. And also what it does is it gives you the trace as well, so you know what's happening as well. So if there is any error, it will prompt you that there was an error. If it was succeeded, then it will show you if it was succeeded or not. You can also use templates from PCF Gallery, and then say you like some control, but you want to enhance that control and then use it for yourself. You can actually start from the template that the people created in PCF Gallery, and then start it from there, and then you can enhance the same code that they have used and use it for yourself. So things like that, pretty neat. Okay, so now we talked about all this PCF things, but um, what is the process of development, right? So I provided the XRM toolbox to you. It's free. You can use it, but then if you don't know the development process, then the tool is of no use. So you need to know what the development process is, how it looks like, right? So first thing is, and again, I mean, the tool is great, but it's always beneficial for developers, especially, to know what the CLI commands are, right? So that's why when I'll show you the tool, I'll also show you how to look at the commands that are getting executed behind the scene, right? So the development process is, first thing is you would initialize a PCF project. Now there are two types of project that we would be working when we develop. So first is your PCF project, and the other one is your CDS project. Now, as the name suggests, PCF project is to create your custom controls. Okay, CDS project is for deployment, for deploying anything to CDS. Yeah. So first thing is we would be creating a PCF project through CLI commands. And then once the PCF project is initialized, then you would start writing your logic, right? You'd add your business logic, you would add your CSS styling, all those, or resource files if you're working with a multi-language. So you'd add all those kind of stuff. Once your component is ready, then you would build it, right? Check for compilation errors, check for any other errors that and the PCF framework does the build for you. So it checks your code. It, even if the TypeScript is saying there is no error, there might be some errors, like the null, you might have missed the null check. So TypeScript might not tell you that you're missing a null check, but the PCF framework build command would tell you that if there is a null check missing. So things like that. And then once you have built your component, the second thing is you will test it, right? So for testing, the framework provides you with the test harness. So it's a local test harness that you can use to test your code, right? And then you can supply the commands, so do the configurations. You can even, so what I do is whenever I'm working with whenever I'm developing the controls, I normally heavily use the test harness to make sure that everything is working fine. Once it is working fine in my test harness, that's when I will be ready to deploy it to an instance. So I can either deploy through a quick deploy mechanism, or it's called pack PCF push. So it's kind of a quick deploy just to test in your dev instance whether your control is working correctly in the CDS environment or not. It was working in test harness, but sometimes it might not work in the CDS itself. So that's why we have a quick deploy kind of functionality, but that's not for the actual deployment to your environment. So once the quick deploys, it's working fine. So I have like two steps, right? First step is test in your PCF harness, PCF test harness, and make sure that your component is working absolutely fine without any errors. You can use your dev tools to go and see what's going behind the scene. There was a nice post by Scott Duro, I believe, and he showed how to connect your controls, or how to connect your debugging to the actual TypeScript files. So you can use that as well, because there's a JS file created and then there's a JS map as well created. So you can do that. That improves the debugging time. So once you have tested everything in your test harness, then I do a quick deploy in the CDS instance and I test it out there itself. If there are no issues, then I'll just remove the code component that I had used for quick deploy, because it doesn't have the right prefixes. It's not in the right solution. So I just delete that. And then once I'm ready to push from dev to test to QA, once I'm ready to deliver my component in that sprint, or wherever how you're working in your project, then what I'll do is I'll initialize my CDS project. So in that CDS project initialization, I'll add my code component, and then I'll deploy it to the CDS environment. So that's how the entire development process goes. Okay. Any questions on the development process? And don't worry if you are overwhelmed with this. We're going to go through each of these steps in next sessions.
Just excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of testing, if we are using like the local before publishing it, what's the functionality that available for us? Can we, for example, test the picking a file using like getting location, or is there like will be mocking for the web API, or no? In case we need to test those function, we need to deploy it and test it inside the environment, the sandbox environment.
Yeah, so you can do pretty much everything except you don't get the you if you're working with a web API, that's one thing that you might not be able to test it. But let's say if you want to get the location, yes, you can do that in the test harness. If you want to say get the configuration or pick a file, you can do that. That's all. That would all be working except the web APIs, because you're not in the CDS environment yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but web API, I'm only talking about like CDS. If you're connecting to CDS web API, you might not be able to do that using the out of the box, like out of the box PCF commands. Because in PCF you can directly connect to CDS using some methods like create record, or it's called context.webapi.create record or retrieve record. You might not be able to use that. But if you're doing a web API to say Azure functions, or if you're doing a web API call to some other web app that has been hosted somewhere else, you can do that certainly in the test harness.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions?
Dinesh, do we have a wrapper to call actions within the PCF by any chance?
Call an action. Uh, I, I don't remember top of my head, but I believe we had done something similar to that. Or maybe we called actions through the web API methods, but not the out of the box web API methods. Because web right now, PCF has its own context um,
Mm-hmm.
methods. So that we only have like crude operations right now. So we can do create, update, delete, and retrieve multiple. These are the
Okay.
only operations that you could do. Other operations or execute method is not
Yes.
available in the PCF context.
Okay. All right. Otherwise, the only way, so you would pretty much do the XHR objects and stuff like that, right? Just to call the actions.
Right. Yeah, I believe we have done something similar, but I'll check what
Okay.
we have done and then I can get back to you on that.
Okay. Because and another question is actually from the security point of view. Usually, what happens, like, if you work with the job, like if I working with the React or anything else, I'm working with the web resource, right? Just for the security reasons, so that I don't expose the endpoints of any such, like, the Azure functions or something. People prefer to call those things within the C# code, which is actions, like server-side code, right?
Hmm.
With the PCF, when we render, when the PCF renders, let's suppose if you use any client side, or if you're using Azure Functions endpoint, which is directly into the PCF, does it
Hmm.
actually get exposed into the browser after compilation?
It might show up in the network resources, but if you're looking at the file that gets generated, it's one big bundle.js file that would
Okay.
have all your React components and all.
Okay.
As I said, like only one file is generated, right? So
Hmm.
that is a very big file,
Hmm.
and it would be very tough to find it out. But if you're using developer tools and if you go to network
Yeah,
resources,
so it would be
so
available.
it might show up in the network.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, so next thing is I'm gonna have a poll, and let me see if I can do it here. Let's see. So I wanted to have like I can go in two ways. I can either use the CLI from scratch, or I can use the XRM toolbox that I have created. I like to use the tool because, as I said, it simplifies the development process and it's faster. But if you guys want me to use the CLI option, I'm okay with that as well. So I'll leave it up to you guys to let me know what you guys prefer. Let me see if I can create a poll here. Um, CLI or Visual. Okay, let's see and send. Who are not able to have access to the chat?
I cannot access it. I'm not seeing the option.
Neither do I. I think I need to rejoin the meeting for that. Sometimes it actually happens in the team.
Yeah.
Me, me as well. I think what you need to do is that to add us as a member rather than guest.
Okay, let me try that. But I mean, normally it doesn't.
Yeah, usually chat is pretty much open, I guess. But
Yeah, it is. But I'll check the settings next time. So make an, yeah, everyone is a participant, and I don't see any other way that I can do any changes to the meetings right now.
Okay, maybe I'll just rejoin the meeting.
No,
That
that's
might
fine.
help.
That's fine. What I'll do is I'll send an email with the poll, and then you just have to say yes or no, and then I'll capture that. Okay.
Okay.
Mm, Let me see. I'm just changing your role. Jay, are you able to see the chat now?
Not really.
Yeah, that's fine. I can send an email, and then you can vote over there. Um, or maybe we can do it right now. We don't have too many participants in this call.
Exactly. Yes,
Just
it's about
selecting.
7,
Yeah. So
6.
let's go with you, Jay, as you are already unmuted. What do you prefer?
I'm fine with both. No problem.
Okay. Abud, that's how you
I,
pronounce your name, Abud?
yeah, that's correct. I prefer to go to with the XRM toolbox tool because it's
Okay.
much
Awesome.
easier than.
Yeah. Deepak.
I will like to go with the PSES or CLI.
Okay. And now help me pronounce your name.
Jürgen, it's XM
Jorgen.
Toolbox. Yeah.
All right. Nice to have you, Jorgen. Um, Mohammed Salahuddin.
I'm fine with the XRM toolbox, but if there is any limitation, then you can tell us that this is the limitation and how we can address it, if there is any.
Yep, for sure. Nijo.
Yeah, I'm fine with both.
Okay. And how about Omar?
Sorry, I was away for 5 minutes. You mean for creating the PCF, right?
Yes. So we have two options. Either I
Yeah.
can show it using the PCF CLI from scratch, or either I can use the XRM Toolbox tool, which
I know the tool. I read about it. That
Mhm.
on the plugin, basically. I never used it. That's why I can't judge. I use only the PCF CLI for a
Okay.
few of the components I created. I don't know what the tool offers more or less than the CLI.
It offers the same exact things. Then CLI just improves your, it just enhances your development experience and speeds up things. That's about it. So majority of the people have said XM Toolbox. So let's go with that. And if you have any questions, or if you guys wanna discuss, have some like specific things in CLI needs to be discussed, then I can discuss that as well. But
Like I would recommend, like, if we will use this XRM toolbox, which is a great choice. Like I am assuming that the plugin behind the scenes called the PCF CLI, no?
yes, it does. And then
Exactly.
that's what
So
I'm gonna
just like
show.
tell us which command you are calling from the CLI, basically.
Yes. So the tool actually shows you which command you're calling.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have that shown as well. Like if you're clicking this button, then what happens behind the scenes, and then we can go through that as well. So you are aware of what's happening in the CLI, and also comfortable using the tool as well. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I had planned for today's session, and I wanted this to be interactive. So I was glad that I was able to do that. But yeah, if you have any comments or any suggestions of how we want to drive this sessions, then feel free to drop me an email, and then I can hopefully uh, make that happen. Yeah.
Sorry, Dinesh, just before you so are we ending up soon, or is it are we jumping into the like installation of anything right now, or we are just ending up the session right now?
We'll be ending up this session because this was supposed to be just the introduction to
Okay.
PCF.
All right.
Next
Okay.
session, we are going to actually go and build some controls and look at the code. And if at all you have computer on your, like if you have two monitors, or if you can follow along on a different laptop, then
Mm-hmm.
feel free. We are going to walk through each and every code piece. So you can actually start building your component along with me.
Okay, and we will be actually using like we will be directly jumping into the React extension, or we'll be just working with the TypeScript at the first?
No, we would be working with the TypeScript. We'll go step by step. I've listed down the agenda in the meetings as well. So
Okay,
today was
right,
the
yeah.
basic introduction. The second is going to be developing the field type custom control. Then the third day
Dataset.
is the data set, and then we'll have probably the React. I forgot. I'll
Perfect.
have to check.
Perfect.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Like, I didn't go through it properly. I'll just go through it. And
Yep.
yeah, I think I just looked into the XRAM toolbox. The one that the add-on that you mentioned about is actually PCF custom control builder, right?
Yes. So yeah, thanks
Okay.
for reminding me that. So before we drop off for the day, so if you have not installed the tool yet, so you go to XRM Toolbox, configuration tool library, and either you can search it with my name or with once this loads up. I don't know why it's taking that time. Wow. Okay, there you go. Then you can either search with PCF or you can search it with my name, click on it and then say install. Okay. Once you have installed it, then you should be able to just use the filter on the top and then say PCF custom control builder. And then this is what it should look like. Oh, for some reason my machine is not working today. Okay, so that's how the tool looks like. Okay, and you know what? We have 5 minutes, so let's utilize that time just to give some overview of the tool, so that tomorrow we don't have to spend that much time and we can actually work on creating the control. So what you want to do is when you set this up, when you load this for the first time, you want to create a blank or a new folder, right, to start with for your control. Okay, so you can create a control. You can create a folder blank with nothing in it, and then select that control location over here. You can just copy the control location and paste it in this text box. And then this is the VS command prompt location. So VS command prompt location is your VS bat file. So what you do is when you click on this button, you have to go and select that bat file. And to do that is you go to your program files, Microsoft Visual Studio. And if you have 2017, you go to 2017. If you have 2019, you go there. Once you're in that, depending on what kind of Visual Studio you have installed, enterprise, community, you would see certain folders in here. You can choose any one of them, go inside that, and inside that you would go to I forgot where you have to go.
Common 7.
Enterprise. Oh, you have to go to Common 7. And once you go to Common 7, then you have to go to Tools. And inside Tool, this is the VS dev command file. It's already populated in the file name, so you don't have to worry about which file you have to select. You just have to look at this file, VS command bat file, and then just say open, and it would be selected. We don't need to do that for building the components, but that is only for building the solution file. But as of now, I didn't think through when we when I was building this. Right now, it's a required field even if you're only building a component. So today, download the tool and populate this control location and populate this VS command prompt location. I'll send you the path again in the email, and this gets saved, so you don't have to do this all the time. So this gets saved in the settings, so you don't have to worry about that. And you have to download the PCF CLI. So to download the PCF CLI, you have to go to this toolbar over here and then say download PCF CLI. Once you click on that, it directly downloads the PCF CLI MSI file, and then you just install it. Now, once it's installed, just to confirm whether it's working or not, you just close this tool and then reopen the tool once it's installed. Okay. And what happens is it goes and checks for the PCF CLI version, and it should show up the version over here. And as I said, the prerequisite is to also install npm version. So npm version also needs to be installed. So for installing the npm, you have to go to nodejs.org and then install npm. You would also need, if you already have Visual Studio, you should already have the bat file ready with you. So you should have .NET Framework 4.6.2. But if not, then make sure that you have that. And you would need Visual Studio Code. Or if you want to use Visual Studio 2017 or 2019, that's fine. But if you want to use Visual Studio Code, then you would want to install Visual Studio Code as well. Okay. So do those things, and then we'll connect tomorrow.
Okay, sorry, I have a question. If Visual Studio is not installed on the system, can we use the Windows command prompt with the box?
Windows command prompt so you don't have Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio 2017 or 2019 anything?
I do have Visual Studio Code.
You have Visual Studio Code. Okay, yeah. So right now, to do MS build, you can give the command file, but right now there's a drawback with the tool itself, which doesn't allow us you to pick any command files. So yeah, why don't you work with me? I can give you a call, and then we can work it out and see how you can make.
No, I can. In the meantime, like so, it is tomorrow the second a day after tomorrow the second session. In the meantime I can install Visual Studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or else if you can connect with me, and then we can work it out something.
Okay.
Cool. So for Dinesh, for Visual Studio Code, so we use command prompt location. Is it? Oh, okay. It's just the command prompt location. Okay, no problem. Okay.
Yeah, it's just a command prompt location.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Perfect. No problem.
Yeah. I know that's kind of
confusing a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I'm gonna change it in future versions. I'm just not getting enough time to work on this tool anymore.
No problem. No problem. Thank you so much.
Yep. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Cool. So see you guys on Thursday. And in meantime, if you have any issues setting up your environment or anything, or if you have any questions, please feel free to drop me an email, and then I can get back to you. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Dinesh. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.